Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we are wading into some huge numbers. We're tackling a really persistent, almost, well, generational problem for the Department for Work and Pensions, the DWP, in Great Britain, benefit overpayments, specifically those due to fraud and error.
It is a colossal challenge, and the immediate scale is staggering. We are talking about an estimated $9.5 billion in benefit expenditure overpaid just in 2024-25.
$9.5 billion. That's basically 10 billion pounds just poof, gone in a single year. We're diving into the National Audit Office, the NAO report on this, and it really highlights just how, well, how embedded this issue is.
Exactly. I mean, this problem is so significant, it's led to this massive historical roadblock for the DWP. You've got successive comptroller and auditor generals who've had to qualify their audit opinions on the DWP's accounts.
Right.
Excluding state pension, mind you. But they've done this for the past 37 years.
37 years. Okay, that's the heavy jargon, qualifying an audit opinion. What does that actually mean for the DWP day to day or maybe year to year?
Well, it basically means that for nearly 4 decades, the auditors just haven't been able to certify that the vast majority of DWP's spending is fully regular or, legally sound. It's a 37-year audit qualification streak, and they are absolutely desperate to end it.
Okay, so our mission today is to really analyze the trends driving that $9.5 billion figure. We need to explore DWP's new strategy, which seems much more focused on prevention, and look at the high-tech tools and also some new legal powers they're deploying to try and finally get a grip on this multi-billion-pound headache. Right, let's start by grounding ourselves in those 2024-25 figures again. The overall overpayment rate was, 3.3% of benefit expenditure, which equals that staggering $9.5 billion.
And it's actually down slightly from the previous year. That was $9.7 billion, or 3.6%, so a small improvement.
Okay, a tiny dip. But the breakdown is crucial, isn't it? What's causing these overpayments?
Absolutely. When you look at the cause, the vast majority, is down to fraud. Estimated $6.5 billion. Then you've got claimant error, people making genuine mistakes. That's about $1.9 billion. And then official error mistakes made by DWP itself or local authorities. That accounts for the remaining $1.0 billion.
And when we talk about which specific benefits are driving most of that loss, universal credit, UC, it still dominates, right?
It does, yeah. It accounted for 67%, 2/3, of the total overpayments by value in 2024-25.
Okay.
But, and this is a really important point, there's actually a source of genuine optimism for the DWP here. The rate of overpayment for UC dropped significantly. It went from a high of 12.4% the previous year down to 9.7% in 2024-25. That's quite a sharp decline.
12.4 down to 9.7. Wow. Okay, why? What changed?
Well, the report attributes that drop mainly to reintroducing controls that were suspended during the pandemic, when the system was just under immense pressure to get money out quickly.
Right, the priority shifted completely then. So when those controls were off, what were the most common types of fraud or error they were seeing with UC?
The sources confirm the top 3 were claimants, particularly self-employed people, not fully declaring their income. That's a big one. Then claimants failing to declare they're living with a partner. And finally, claimants not declaring all their financial assets, savings and capital. These are the main drivers.
Okay, but here's something that really jumped out from the report. A genuine statistical surprise. For the first time since universal credit was rolled out nationally, it did not have the highest overpayment rate across all the different benefits.
That's right. That dubious honor, you would say, now belongs to pension credit. It had an estimated overpayment rate of 10.3%, which equates to about $610 million. Now, it's a smaller benefit overall compared to UC in terms of total spending, but the rate of error is now higher.
Pension credit, aimed at retirees. Why is that suddenly driving up the error rate? What are the specific issues there?
Well, again, similar to UC, a huge chunk, 4.0% of the spending came from claimants not fully declaring financial assets, savings, capital, that sort of thing. But uniquely for pension credit, another big slice, 2.1%, was due to claimants staying abroad longer than the rules allow. It just highlights that different benefits, different claimant groups have their own specific risks and need tailored controls.
Beyond these internal challenges and benefit specifics, what external forces does the NAO suggest are making this whole fight harder for DWP?
There are several things, really. First, just the inherent complexity of the benefit system itself. It's a massive structural hurdle. Second, there's the growing and frankly evolving threat of serious and organized crime. They're specifically targeting these payments, often using quite sophisticated tech. And third, the DWP also pointed to analysis suggesting, a perceived softening of attitudes towards fraud in society.
Softening attitudes. How so?
They cited surveys where, more respondents felt certain types of undeclared earnings were maybe only a bit wrong rather than seriously wrong. That kind of shift in public perception doesn't help.
Okay, given those colossal fraud numbers, the organized crime threat, maybe even shifting attitudes, the obvious question is how are they fundamentally changing their strategy? They must have realized they were always playing catch-up.
Precisely. Their older strategies, sort of pre-2022, were maybe too broad, a bit principles-based, lacking really tangible metrics and clear accountability. The refreshed strategy, approved in November 2024, it's really a philosophical shift. Stop chasing the money after it's gone out. Focus heavily on prevention. The goal is locking the gates before the inaccurate payment even goes out the door.
Right. The new vision talks about preventing inaccurate payments by addressing internal challenges. And key objectives like better use of customer data and ensuring accountability for payment accuracy that is organization-wide.
Yeah, that organization-wide accountability is crucial because processing a claim touches so many different parts of the DWP, and they are backing this with serious long-term funding. The government awarded £6.7 billion of dedicated funding specifically for fraud and error activity. That covers 9 years, right through to 2028-29.
$6.7 billion, that sounds like a lot. But the source material notes that money isn't evenly spread out as it's kind of backloaded.
That's right. Over half of it, 52%, about $3.5 billion, is actually scheduled for the last 3 years of that period, starting in 2026-27. In the meantime, though, they have specific targets to hit. These are measured mainly through estimated savings in what's called annually managed expenditure, or AME.
And just quickly for listeners, AME covers spending like benefits that's demand-led. It goes up or down depending on need. So savings here mean reducing the amount they expect to have to spend on benefits because they've stopped fraud or error.
Exactly. And on that metric, they have actually exceeded their targets recently. They achieved £2.0 billion in savings in 2024-25 against a target of $1.7 billion. And the total estimated AME saved from April 2022 to March 2025 is $4.5 billion. So operationally, they are delivering results.
They are delivering, yes, but the sources highlight these core systemic roadblocks that threaten their ability to sustain this, particularly around data. This seems critical.
This is the absolute foundational problem. The DWP's core IT systems are, well, they're just not fully integrated. This means staff often can't get a single unified view of a claimant's data across all the different benefit systems they might be interacting with. Imagine trying to spot inconsistencies like that. But compounding that is an even more, frankly, unbelievable issue. The lack of common data standards, not just within DWP, but across government.
Wait, hang on. In a system handling nearly £10 billion in errors, you're telling me that today, in 2025, they still can't agree on a single standard way to type in someone's address. How is that possible?
It sounds incredible, doesn't it? But the NAO found multiple different formats being used for entering customer addresses. That makes it genuinely impossible to consistently and reliably match records across benefits, or with data from other government departments like HMRC. Until they fix those fundamental data standards, every high-tech solution they try to deploy is going to hit these roadblocks. It's like building on sand.
That context makes their efforts to learn from other countries even more important, I suppose.
It does. The sources mention Denmark as an example DWP is looking at. Denmark apparently achieved impressive success using around 100 different machine learning models for fraud and error detection. But, crucially, they spent 3 to 4 years before that investing heavily in getting accurate, interoperable IT systems and government-wide data standards in place. They built the foundation first. That foundation is what the DWP is still arguably missing.
Okay, let's jump into part 3 then. Let's look at the key initiatives they are running, while presumably trying to fix the plumbing in the background. One of their most innovative projects uses machine learning, ML, to flag potentially dodgy claims for universal credit advances.
Yes, and this has actually been a bit of a success story, at least in the short term. The ML model identifies advanced requests that it assesses as high risk, and it refers them to a human caseworker for review. It doesn't make the decision itself. Since May 2022, they estimate it saved around £4.4 million. And critically, as I said, the final decision about payment is always made by a person. That's a key safeguard.
But this kind of technology inevitably raises really important ethical questions, fairness questions, particularly around bias, which the DWP had to address proactively.
Precisely. After concerns were raised, DWP did perform and publish a detailed fairness assessment on this specific model back in July 2025. Now, on the efficiency side, they found the model was actually pretty effective, about 3 times more effective at identifying fraud risk than just looking at a random sample of claims.
3 times better. But there was a trade-off, wasn't there? Visible in who was getting flagged.
Yes, and this is where the conversation gets, quite nuanced and important. The analysis showed that certain groups were significantly over-referred for review. Specifically, older claimants, those in the 45 to 54 age group and above, and also non-UK nationals. Now, their legitimate requests were still approved after review, but being consistently singled out, even if payment isn't ultimately stopped, creates an administrative burden. It's stressful. Even if the median delay was only found to be 1 day compared to automatic approvals, that's still a real-world consequence for those groups, driven by the pursuit of efficiency.
Okay, moving from high-tech to, well, more operational scale. DWP launched this massive boots-on-the-ground program called Targeted Case Review, or TCR. That started in 2022, specifically to tackle the surge in fraud they suspected happened with UC during the pandemic rush.
Yeah, this was a rapid and huge scale-up. By January 2025, it involved something like 3,100 DWP staff plus another 2,600 agents from outsourced providers. Huge numbers. And operationally, it seems to have paid off in terms of savings. The program achieved $581 million in AME savings, which is actually 11% more than they expected.
Okay, good savings. But I read the hit rate, the proportion of cases they reviewed that actually turned out to be incorrect, fell a bit short.
It did. DWP expected about 24% of the reviewed cases to have an error or fraud. The actual hit rate came in at 20%. But what's perhaps more interesting here is that the TCR program itself is generating really crucial operational insights. It's teaching them things that can lead to policy change.
How so?
Well, for instance, TCR clearly identified that people failing to report changes in their circumstances, maybe starting work or their savings going up, was a massive source of error accumulating over time. This insight directly led DWP to bring in a new policy: periodic redeclaration for UC claims. Basically, making people regularly reconfirm their circumstances are still the same. So they're using the data from these reviews to try and fix systemic flaws in the policy itself.
Right, learning from doing. Okay, finally, let's talk about new powers. Legislation. The government introduced the Public Authorities Fraud, Error, and Recovery Bill in January 2025. What's the key thing there?
The really big measure in that bill is around eligibility verification. It represents quite a major shift in powers. Essentially, it would give DWP the power to compel banks and other financial institutions to provide them with information to verify a claimant's eligibility. Things like account balances. DWP expects this power alone to deliver gross savings of $1.5 billion by 2029-30, mainly by catching incorrect payments much earlier, stopping debt building up.
But whenever the government grants itself broad, new data access powers like this, you always get stakeholders raising red flags, don't you? Concerns about privacy, impact on vulnerable people?
Absolutely, they did. Concerns were definitely raised that these powers might disproportionately affect vulnerable claimants, perhaps those who struggle with complex processes or digital access, or the worry that the net might end up catching people who made genuine mistakes, rather than just targeting organized fraudsters. DWP has stressed they are putting safeguards in place. And importantly, they worked closely with the Information Commissioner's Office, the ICO, to try and tightly define exactly what type of information can be requested and shared to minimize intrusion.
Okay, so let's try and synthesize all of this. We've covered the scale, the strategy shift, the tech, the operations, the new laws. What does this all mean for DWP's long war on fraud and error?
Well, I think it means that while that headline number, 9.5 billion, remains far too high, DWP has demonstrated some significant operational headway. You see that particularly with the sharp drop in the universal credit overpayment rate. That's a real positive. The next few years, though, will really be defined by two big things. Can they successfully implement this new prevention-focused strategy across the board? And, critically, can they finally tackle those deep-seated systemic data standardization and IT integration challenges that the NAO flagged up so clearly? That seems key.
They've set themselves a target, haven't they? A multi-year ambition to get the overall cross-welfare overpayment rate back down to the pre-pandemic level. It was about 3.1% by 2028-29.
That's the ambition. But to achieve the really long-term goal, the one that gets rid of that 37-year-old audit qualification, they'll probably need to go further. They'll need to focus on extending effective detection and prevention activities to those other high-risk benefits, particularly pension credit, which, as we saw, is now topping the charts for the error rate.
Okay, so maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over after hearing all this.
Yeah, I think considering that fairness assessment of the machine learning model we discussed, it really highlights this continuous balancing act DWP faces. How much efficiency, how much cost saving can realistically be achieved through these advanced data analytics and algorithms before the inevitable trade-offs risk disproportionately impacting certain claiming groups like older citizens or non-UK nationals who might already be vulnerable or need the most support from the system in the first place. Where do you draw that line?